Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Today we're continuing our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation. We are on chapter 10. Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And today we'll cover 4 verses, beginning with 27, which is on the board. Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Text 27, please repeat. Utsisrikshor datu malam.
Utsisrikshor datu malam.
Utsisrikshor datu malam.
Utsisrikshor. Was that O-R? S-O-R. Okay, I thought it was an A.
Yeah, S-O-R.
Okay, sorry.
Niravidyata Vaikudam.
Niravidyata Vaikudam.
Niravidyata Vaikudam.
Niravidyata Vaikudam.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Utsarga Ubayashraya.
Utsarga Ubayashraya.
Utsarga Ubayashraya.
Utsarga Ubayashraya.
Utsisrikshor datu malam. So this is Ut-Shri-Shrikshor. Utsi. That's like, yeah. Utsi-Shrik-Shor. It's a hard one.
Yeah.
Utsis-Shrik-Shor. Let's do that one. Put the 2 S's on the same syllable. Ut-Sis-Shrik-Shor. 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 Gudam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Utsarga ubayashraya.
Usarga
Ubhayashraya.
Please chant.
Utsisrikshordatu malam.
Utsisrikshordatu malam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Utsarga ubhayashraya.
Usarga ubayashraya.
Utsisrikshordatu malam.
Utsisrikshordatu malam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Utsarga ubayashraya.
Utsarga ubhayashraya.
Anybody else?
Utsisrikshordatu malam.
Utsisrikshordatu malam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Niravidyatavai gudam.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Tatapayustato mitra.
Utsarga vibayashara.
Utsarga ubhayashraya.
Word for word sentence, please repeat. Utsisriksho.
Utsisriksho.
Desiring to evacuate.
Desiring to evacuate.
Datu malam.
Datu malam.
Refuse of eatables.
Refuse of evil.
Niravidyata.
Niravidyata.
Became open.
Became open.
Why? Certainly.
Certainly.
Gudam.
Gudam.
The evacuating hole. Tata. Thereafter.
Thereafter.
Ayu. The evacuating sense organ.
Evacuating sense organ.
Tata.
Tata.
Thereafter.
Thereafter.
Mitra.
Mitra.
The controlling demigod.
The controlling demigod.
Sargaha.
Utsarga.
The substance evacuated.
Substance evacuated.
Ubaya.
Ubaya.
Both. Ashraya.
Ashraya.
Shelter.
Shelter.
Translations and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So we're continuing with this description of the Virat Purusha manifesting different bodily functions and how the Virat Rupa, the Virat Purusha, he first manifests these bodily functions, and then all the living entities can also manifest these bodily functions. So today's text 27 reads, Thereafter, when he desired to evacuate the refuse of eatables, the evacuating hole, anus, and the sensory organ thereof developed along with the controlling deity. So, when the Virat Purusha desired to evacuate, then the anus manifested, the sensory organ thereof developed, along with the controlling deity Mitra. The sensory organ and the evacuating substance are both under the shelter of the controlling deity. Purport, even in the matter of evacuating stool, the refuse is controlled. So how can the living entity claim to be independent? We'll talk about stool today. So, very, very simple point here. They were not in control of anything. Yeah.
What?
I said, we're not in control of anything.
Absolutely not.
You know, when the call of nature comes, you have to go answer it. Even if you say, I don't want to, or I refuse to, what are you going to do about it? You know? And yet, despite the fact that how many of us can control, you know, the call of nature? We can't even control, you know, all these bodily functions that go on, the heartbeat, the growing of the hair. You know, we're not in control of that. Or you can say, well, we'll exercise and we'll lower our heart rate or our breathing rate. But everything's under control, yet we spend our whole time claiming our independence. We behave because we believe as though we're actually independent. I'm in control of this big business, you know, I'm the CEO of a big business, or I'm the king or the president of the country, or I control my family members, or I control my pet dog, right? Nice little pet that I control. But we can't even control our senses, we can't even control, you know, the ability to evacuate. How embarrassing. It's actually really embarrassing when you think about it. We can't even control our own, you know, if you're meant to, like, the call of nature comes right now and you're meant to have diarrhea, you might not even be able to walk to the bathroom in time. You might just, you know, dirty your pants, as they say. Or if you're constipated and you can't, you know, pass stool, you'll be stuffed up for days. We're not even in control. Totally dependent. So people will say, you know, when you talk about God as a person, oh, God's a person, okay, does he eat? Yeah. Does he pass stool? Yes. But his eating and his passing stool are not like our eating and passing stool. It's never contaminated. So in the chapters about Lord Rishabdev, we hear how Lord Rishabdev passed stool, but his stool was aromatic.
I just read that
Yeah?
2 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
You know, that his stool wasn't contaminating like ours. Yeah, it's aromatic.
You know, the expression dying with dignity, I often wondered what that was about.
Mm.
But that's what it is about, this topic. You don't want, in other words, someone made sure they weren't going to have to be humiliated in the end. So they're taking...
We'll be worse than babies at the end. Because babies, ask any mother, babies, you know, they don't have any control over their bowel movements, so they just like pass stool and urine and, you know. But mothers, they don't have a problem with that. Bhagavatam says that the mother thinks it's like sandalwood paste. At least in the beginning months. In the beginning months, the mother thinks, oh, my baby's stool is nice and even aromatic, like sandalwood paste. And then as the kid gets older, then it's like, hey man, get diaper trained. I'm not going to do this anymore, right? But when we're on our deathbed and we can't control our bodily fluids and evacuations, no one's going to be saying, oh, it smells like sandalwood paste.
Yeah.
How embarrassing. It's totally, you know, yet we're so proud of this body and our ability to control. But let's read a few more verses. Text 28. Asis prishso purapurya nadivara mahanata trapanastato mrityu takvam ubayashayam. Thereafter, when he desired to move from one body to another, the navel and the air of departure and death were combinedly created. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force. Purport. The prana vayu continues the life. Prana vayu means vayu means air. Well, prana means air, but prana vayu, the flow of air, different types of airs that flow throughout the body in their respective circuitry. So the prana vayu continues the life, and the apana vayu stops the living force. Both the vibrations are generated from the abdominal hole, the navel. This navel is the joint from one body to the other. Lord Brahma was born of the abdominal hole of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu as a separate body. And the same principle is followed even in the birth of any ordinary body. The body of the child develops from the body of the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint, the umbilical cord. And that is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself, as separated many. The living entities are therefore separated parts, and thus they have no independence. So again, the point of non-independence is being stressed here by describing that just as a mother, at least in the mammal species, gives birth to separate individuals by developing their body in her body, connected through the umbilical cord. When that umbilical cord gets cut at birth, that baby now has seemingly independent existence, but they're not actually independent. And similarly, when the Supreme Lord, Eko Bahusyam, when he desires to become many, how does he manifest those many? Here in the material world, the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, he sprouts a lotus flower coming from his navel. That lotus flower sprouts up, and Lord Brahma, the first created being, takes birth atop that lotus flower. Now all the different living entities are said to be held up in that lotus flower, and then Lord Brahma creates the material bodies for them. So Prabhupada's making the point here that just like the child comes from the mother, so the many living entities come from Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. So although they appear to be separate individuals, because we are individuals, but, and like, you don't see the connection, but we're not independent. Although the umbilical cord may be cut, there's no independent existence. Text 29. Aditsor anapananam asankrukshnam tanadaya nadya samudraschartayos tushti pushtistarashraye. When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. Purport: the controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries, the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. I mean, Ayurveda, probably modern medicine too, always stresses this point. If you've got some disease, just boil it all back down to the gastrointestinal system. Get your gastrointestinal system up and working in proper order. Clean, keep it cleaned every day, cleansed. That means one should evacuate stool every day. If one's not evacuating stool every day, that means constipation, that means disease. The body has to be clean inside and outside. So Ayurveda already knows all this. So therefore the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. The rivers and the seas, being the controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. So I think it's logical to conclude here that in today's world we do find modern advanced man, right? We're so advanced scientifically, yet, and agriculturally, yet what do we find in modern man? Exponentially increasing occurrences of disease. And those diseases come primarily from the gastrointestinal system and the arteries, arterial sclerosis, cardiac disease. It's all coming from disease of the arteries. Diabetes, everything boils down to unhealthy gastrointestinal system. So why do we find modern man with all these difficulties? We can say, because there's processed sugar and processed oil, and there's chemical pesticides, and we could make a mechanistic description of why modern man is so unhealthy. But it really boils down to that we're offending. Not only are we neglecting, ignoring, and not acknowledging, but we're downright offending the controlling deities of the seas and rivers. How do we offend them? Well, first of all, we totally ignore them. There's no puja going on or anything like that. No offerings or acknowledgement or, no gratefulness. And then we go and we pollute them. From oil spills to the chemical industries dumping all their factory waste. Man just interfering with the ecological systems of the oceans and seas and rivers. So because we do not acknowledge, because we're advanced, we're advanced people, we don't believe that behind the sun there's a person. Or behind the moon, there's a person. Or behind the wind, there's a person. Or behind the ocean, that's for you Aborigine people. You Aborigine people, you go out there and you do your little rain dance and your little sun dance and do all your little offerings. You believe in all these gods behind everything in nature. Because you're just unintelligent, uncivilized Aborigine people. But we, modern, advanced, sophisticated, civilized man, we don't accept that. That's nonsense. So by that very arrogant, ignorant, puffed up conception of what the world is, what our position is in it, we ignore and downright offend the controlling deities. So like in Ayurveda, the Vedic system, if one has a particular disease, yes, they're given herbs and all this kind of stuff, but they're also given spiritual practices. Like you have to do puja for such and such demigod. You have arterial disease of the arteries. You'll be given a demigod to worship along with your medical treatment. Or you have eye disease. You have a particular demigod you're suggested to do puja to. Because you have to appease. This is not spiritual, of course, because worshiping the demigods isn't spiritual. But at least it's acknowledging superior personalities behind all the events in the natural world. So you have to appease the controlling deity if you have eye disease. You don't just feed the eye chemical medication or even herbal medication. There has to be some pleasing of the demigod. There's paralysis in the body. We have to please that demigod who's in charge. We were discussing, I think, last week, how every movement, I can't lift my little finger without the controlling deity giving me that permission to do so. So Srimad Bhagavatam really is the answer to all questions, as this chapter says, the chapter title.
It says it every chapter, almost.
Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions.
Said
Not
all-
just questions about who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's even the answer to like really down to earth, day to day, mundane,
Yes.
like how can I solve my constipation problem? How can I solve my gastrointestinal problems? There's always controlling deities. So the final verse for today's text 30. Nidid yasor atmamayam hridayam niravidyata tato manas chandra iti sankalpa kana evacha. When there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy, then the heart, the seat of the mind, the moon, determination, and all desire became manifested. Purport: the heart of every living entity is the seat of the Supersoul, or Amatma, a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without his presence, the living entity cannot get into the working energy according to his past deeds. The living entities who are conditioned in the material world are manifested in the creation in terms of respective inclinations inherent in them. Those respective inclinations inherent in them mean from the last creation. This is talking about at the beginning of the world cycle, the end of the night of Brahma, then another creation begins. And the living entities who have been asleep in the body of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu are again manifested, and they take bodies. Well, what body are you going to get when the next day of Brahma comes? You're going to get that body which is tailored to the inclinations that you've been tied up with through the night of Brahma. You've been sleeping in the body of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And when you wake up at the beginning of Brahma's day, you will be given a physical body that is in terms of the respective inclination inherent in us, meaning from the past kalpa, the day of Brahma. So the living entities who are conditioned in the material world are manifested in the creation in terms of respective inclinations inherent in them, and the requisite material body is offered to each and every one of them by the material energy under the direction of the Supersoul. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 9:10. When therefore the Supersoul is situated in the heart of the conditioned soul, the requisite mind is manifested in the conditioned soul, and he becomes conscious of his occupation, as one is conscious of his duty after waking up from slumber. Therefore, the material mind of the living entity develops when the Supersoul sits on his heart, after which the mind, the controlling deity, moon, and then the activities of the mind, namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. The activities of the mind cannot begin without the manifestation of the heart, and the heart becomes manifested when the Lord wants to see the activities of the material creation. End of Srila Prabhupada's purport. So we notice every time something is manifested, three things come manifested together. The instrument, in this case the mind, the controlling deity of that instrument, in this case the moon, is the controlling deity of the mind, and then the activities of that instrument, in this case thinking, feeling, and willing. These three things are interdependent. They don't manifest separately or independently. They all three manifest together as one package. The instrument, the controlling deity of the instrument, and then the activities of that instrument. You can't just have the organ and then have the activities. The controlling deity is there. And by not acknowledging the controlling deity, then the activities of that organ can be terminated. So simple point through these verses is that we're foolish for declaring independence. So I just wanted to, I picked out, I think, 4 verses from Bhagavatam that talk about this false independence of the living entity. So I'll just read those 4 verses and then I'll stop there. So in the 3rd canto, Kapila Dev says to his mother Devahuti, by discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up. Like, we can't give up our desire to lord it over material nature just by somebody telling us, stop it, stop lording it over material nature. We have to recognize the faultiness of it. How do we recognize the faultiness of it? Well, yeah, one is by intellectually understanding because we hear. But most of us don't learn by hearing. It says that a truly intelligent person learns by hearing. A less intelligent person, which we are in Kali Yuga, we don't learn unless we go to the school of hard knocks. We learn the hard way by experiencing. And those of us who are fools, we never learn, despite all the hard knocks. So Kapila is saying that by discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, then the living entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory. What does that mean, he becomes independent? He becomes independent of the control of material nature. He's no longer a puppet in the hands of the free modes of nature. So the only way you become independent is by discovering the faultiness of our desire to be independent. Seems like a contradiction, like an oxymoron or something. While you desire to be an independent enjoyer or lord, you can't become independent. But when you discover the faultiness of that pursuit and give it up, then you actually become independent. Then in the 6th canto, we find the demigods saying, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created us by his external potency, and by whose mercy we expand the creation of the universe, is always situated before us as the Supersoul, but we cannot see his form. See, in Svarga, the demigods are saying, in Svarga Loka, the heavenly planets, the Lord's present right before them. But we cannot see his form. We're unable to see him because, not because they have cataracts. We're unable to see him because all of us think that we are separate and independent gods. Seeing but not seeing. Right? Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that when I descend, a foolish person is taking as an ordinary human. So they don't really see me. Because they're seeing but not seeing. So why can't they see the Lord, recognize him? Because of thinking that we are separate and independent gods. And we do that too. I'm the god of my family, I'm the god of this company, or whatever. Later in the 6th canto, Vritrasura says to Indra, as a wooden doll that looks like a woman, or as an animal made of grass and leaves, cannot move or dance independently, but depends fully on the person who handles it, like a puppet on strings. All of us dance according to the desire of the Supreme Controller, the personality of Godhead. No one is independent. Prabhupada, it might have been in that purport, maybe it was elsewhere. It's this next purport, the next one. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is also the 6th canto, Shukadeva Goswami. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master and proprietor of everything, is certainly not interested in the temporary cosmic manifestation nonetheless. Just as a boy at the beach creates something in which he's not interested, talking about like sandcastles and stuff. He just like does it for fun, but then he walks away. The Lord, keeping everything under his control, causes creation, maintenance, and annihilation. He creates by engaging a father to beget a son. He maintains by engaging a government or king to see to the public's welfare. And he annihilates through agents for killing, such as snakes. The agents for creation, maintenance, and annihilation have no independent potency. But because of the spell of the illusory energy, one thinks himself the creator, maintainer, and annihilator. Okay, so it wasn't Prabhupada, it was actually Shukadev himself who says that. That even when we have these functions of creation, maintenance, and destruction, we're just agents or instruments. So the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement is to bring us to the point of acknowledging that our only identity is Jivara Sripur Krishna and Nityadas. I'm just an instrument of Krishna. That's what it means to be a servant, to be an instrument. And we have to give up this false ego of that I'm some kind of independent enjoyer. And unless and until that happens, we're not going to go anywhere in Krishna consciousness. We're going to be stuck. So we'll stop there, see if there's any discussion. Even in devotional service, we manifest this propensity to be independent, so we have to be really, 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 really careful. Okay, we'll stop there then. Begin tomorrow on text 30, or 31.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nice to know we're not in control of anything.
It's kind of a relief. Krishna
It's a realization
says,
that
Bhoktaram Jagatapasam Sarva Lokamaheshwaram Sridam Sarvabhutanam Yakavam Shantam Richati. Only that person can be peaceful. Who? That person who acknowledges that I'm the controller, I'm the proprietor, I'm the enjoyer. Then you
Take away so much anxiety.
Exactly. That's why it's called the peace formula.
Yes.
Bhagavad Gita 529, peace formula.
It's like, you know, during the downpour of rain on Govardhan Hill, how, you know, when Krishna lifted the hill, how so many of the gopis and all the ladies were all peaceful, but the Brahmin men were holding the cane. They're still in anxiety, helping Krishna hold the hill, you know, still wanting to hold on to some of that controlling, you know. Of course, it's all Leela. That's what I always say, you know. I'm like that. I'm always thinking, I have to help Krishna.
Right.
Thank you, Matthew.
Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Always love the world. You should always on the other side.
I'm glad you said that because my shoes are tight.
So, you know, Peru,
You came in the back.
always do that.
So you want to meet under the pavilion in like maybe 10 minutes?
Sure.
Is that good for you?
Sure.
Can you ask Victor Shabra if he thinks he's giving class Saturday?
Well, if you want him to, he
Well,
will.
we had a discussion, but it was a while back.
Okay, he'll do on Saturday.
Yeah.
You know, Gokul Ranjana Prabhu, the other day when we were talking about driver's license,
Yeah.
I thought you didn't have a Mississippi license. But if you already have one, you don't need anything. You just go there and it takes 5 minutes. You don't need a birth certificate or proof of...
Oh, yeah?
You just walk in and say, hi. When we were there, so many people came in 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes.
Really?
You just give
No
them
background check.
You just give them your driver's license. They say, is this still your current address? Yes. Okay. And then they run your
Well,
thing,
that's
make
nice.
sure you're not a criminal, and then they take your picture and give you a
That's
license.
nice to know. Because Colin has to do it next year, in the beginning of this coming year. Did you see anybody have to do an eye test?
Only those of us who are getting a new license.
Okay, good.
I didn't see people who were renewing doing an eye test.
They
Maybe they did.
If
Maybe they
open-
did. And I didn't know. I totally failed my eye test. but they passed me anyway.
You need glasses?
Yeah. I totally failed it, and she just passed me anyway. But they made that
I was practically, and I was totally surprised. Because I was seeing really good with one eye. And then all of a sudden I realized that I was only seeing half of it. Like, so I was practically, one eye was not functioning.
Their eye exam here, you just look at the screen and read.
Because there's two things, you go like this,
Yeah.
and if you close one eye, you see better. At least for me.
In Illinois, you don't just read, you also have to do peripheral vision, like a flash of light,
Yeah,
and see what sides. They don't do that here.
Yeah. I remember doing that in some states.
But the worst thing that would happen if you flunk your eye exam, they just make you go